Hi guys, it's Jess and welcome back to my channel. For today's video I am going to be sharing with you my reading resolutions for the year 2017, and I wasn't too sure of the format that I wanted my resolutions to take this year, and then I watched a video by Jordan from J Bookish, and she basically had chosen 12 different genres and then picked a book which fits into each of those genres, and they made up the books that she wanted to read this year. And I really liked that idea because it means committing to reading just one book a month, and I thought that I could pick some genres which I wouldn't normally choose books from. So I have decided to borrow her idea, and I've changed the genre slightly to fit the kind of stuff that I want to read this year, but that is the format that my reading resolutions are going to take. Some of these books I have, some of them I don't have, so I will either have to buy the paperback copy or download them onto my Kindle. But yeah, let's just jump straight in. So the first genre on my list is classics, and I would like to try really hard to read more classic literature. As you can see behind me, these red spines here are all Charles Dickens books, and I've probably only read 2 of them. I just find them very difficult to get into, and I find that it takes a lot of concentration for me to read them. It's not like just losing myself in a fantasy storyline or something like that. But I do think that classic literature has a lot to offer, and I really want to read some more. So I have already started my classic lit pick for this year, and that was Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. I am about halfway through and I'm really enjoying it actually. I find that Jane Austen's writing is very accessible if you're not familiar with classic literature, and I find it quite amusing as well. So this book is about 2 sisters who are very different in personality. You have Eleanor, who is very proper and behaves in the way that society expect, and you have Marianne, who is very willful and driven by the things that she wants to do and her feelings. And the 2 sisters have to sort of rely on one another as they navigate society and try to deal with a change of circumstances once their father has died. They kind of have to deal with issues of financial security. They have to deal with just generally being in society and the expectations placed on them, and then finding a husband as well. So I haven't read this before, and as I said, I'm about halfway through and I'm really enjoying it, so that is my first pick. Then genre number 2 is modern classic, and for this I have chosen The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. I don't know too much about this. I know that it's a dystopian novel, and it's set in a world where women, their whole job in life, their whole purpose in life is to have children. They're not allowed to have jobs or responsibility. They're not allowed to read or earn money or have money of any kind, and it's about one particular handmaid and her story in this dystopian world, and that is pretty much all I know about it. And genre number 3 is historical fiction, and for this I have picked Between Shades of Grey by Ruta Sepetys. This is a book that has been on my TBR for months, and I am absolutely 100% going to read it this year. It is set during World War II, and it tells the story of a 15-year-old Lithuanian girl who is sent by the Russians to a work camp in Siberia, and she uses her art as a form of escape, but she also uses it to try and send messages to her father, I think she goes with her mum and her brother to the work camp, and her father is sent somewhere else, so they are trying to communicate with her father and let her father know that they are all still alive. And that is pretty much all I know about it. I understand that it is quite a hard-hitting and moving read, but that it also is full of inspirational and hopeful moments as well, and I've heard lots of people say very good things about this book, so I'm really looking forward to picking this one up. Then a YA novel, and for this I have picked The Raven Boys by Maggie Stiefvater. Again, I'm interested to read this because I have seen varied reviews on it. Some people absolutely adore this series of books, and some people really don't get on with it at all, so I am very interested to see where I fit on the spectrum. And again, I know limited things about this book. I know it's about a young girl called Blue who comes from a family of seers, and she has been told her entire life that she will cause the death of her true love. And then one year she meets a boy called Gansey, who's a pupil at the local private school, and the boys that go there are known as the Raven Boys, and she is attracted to Gansey, and their stories sort of become intertwined, and Blue begins to question whether the things that she has always been told are actually true. And Ganzi's story is that he is on some kind of quest which also involves 3 other boys from the school, and that is literally all I know. The next category that I've chosen is one that I am not particularly familiar with. I've probably read 2 of these types of books in my entire life, and that is science fiction. And for this I have chosen Dark Matter by Blake Crouch, and I have heard nothing but high praise for this book. I've avoided spoilers as much as I can because I believe there are lots of twists and turns in this story, so it's always better to go into that kind of book blind. But the basic premise is that one day a guy is knocked unconscious, and when he wakes up, his entire life has just basically disappeared. So his wife is not his wife, his career is not his career, his son has never been born, and it's sort of his journey to get back the life that he loves. And that's kind of a really basic premise, but I think that it sounds really interesting. I understand from sort of watching other YouTubers talk about it that even though it's a science fiction book, the sciencey part of it is quite accessible, which is usually what puts me off reading science fiction, that it just goes completely over my head. So I am very interested to read a book in which the science is explained in a way that someone like me could maybe understand what I'm reading. So I'm very interested to read that one. Next up is a thriller, and for this I have picked I'm Travelling Alone by Samuel Bjork. This is the first book in a new Nordic noir detective series, and it's basically about 2 detectives who discover the body of a young girl hanging from a tree in the middle of nowhere, and they have absolutely no clue who she is or how she got there, and all she has is a tag around her neck which says I'm travelling alone. So I think that this is going to be super creepy. I think it's going to be super suspenseful and atmospheric. Again, I've heard a lot of good things about this book and this author, and I think the thing that I like about it, as with most of this kind of Scandinavian / Nordic noir type crime books, is that the detectives often have their own stories to tell in the storyline. So it isn't just about the uncovering of who killed this young girl, it's also about the fact that the detectives haven't quite got their lives completely together either, and this definitely fits that category, so I'm really looking forward to reading this one. Next up is literary fiction, and for that I have chosen The Underground Railroad by Colson Whitehead. This is about a young girl called Cora who is a slave on a cotton plantation in Georgia, and she decides that she is going to escape on the Underground Railroad. I believe in this book the Underground Railroad has been written so that it is literally a railroad that is underground, which is kind of a unique twist on the Underground Railroad that actually existed during the times of slavery in America. I haven't read many books about slavery in America. I was first introduced to the idea of the Underground Railroad in a book by Tracy Chevalier, which I recently talked about, called The Last Runaway, and I really enjoyed kind of discovering more about it, so I looked for books that kind of covered this topic, and the Underground Railroad came up quite a few times as a recommended read, so I'm very intrigued to read it. I understand that it is quite hard-hitting, but again, it has very high praise on Goodreads, so I'm really looking forward to getting into that one. Next up we have fantasy, obviously, and for this I have chosen An Ember in the Ashes by Sabaa Tahir. This is a fantasy book which is based on ancient Rome, and it's about Leia, who is a slave, and she is forced to become a spy for the rebels when her brother is arrested by the Empire for treason, and she wants the rebels to help rescue her brother, and in exchange she agrees to become some kind of super undercover spy for them. And pretty much that is all I know. I know that Katie from Life Between Words really rates these books, and we have very similar taste, even in fantasy, so I'm really looking forward to reading this one. And also I love ancient Rome, so I'm intrigued to see how Sabaa Tahir has kind of created a fantastical world based around ancient Rome as well. Then another category of book that I don't normally read, and that is non-fiction, and for this I have chosen Another Day in the Death of America by Gary Young. This is a book about gun crime in America, although the tagline is that it is not about gun control, but it's about what happens to a country when there is no gun control. And basically Gary Young picked a random day in November in 2013, and he follows the stories of each young person who lost their lives because of a gun crime incident in America. So there is a child who is 9, and it goes right the way up to a young adult who was 19, and across the whole of the country, and he just tells 10 individual stories about what happened, basically. And I could probably have picked not such a hard-hitting non-fiction book, but I kind of felt like I wanted to read something that was important. I wanted to read something that would educate me, and although gun control is not an issue that we have here in the UK, I still think it's a very, very important thing to know and to understand about. So yeah, I'm intrigued to pick this up and kind of see, kind of read these stories and find out about these people's lives and how this has impacted on their families as well. Then I chose women's contemporary fiction as my next category, and for this I have chosen Winter Garden by Kristen Hanna. I read The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna last year and really, really enjoyed that. This book is not so much a historical fiction book, but I loved her style of writing so much that I was really keen to pick up some other stuff that she had written. So basically this is about two sisters who are brought back together on their father's deathbed, and they must face their mum, who is extremely cold and detached, and they don't really get on with her at all. And then as their father lies on his deathbed, he extracts a promise from them that they are going to uncover their mother's story. And so we go back 50 years to Russia, and we kind of begin to uncover who their mum is, why she is the way that she is, and it's very much a story about mother-daughter bonds, but also about how our pasts can impact on our present. So I just think that sounds really, really interesting. Again, I don't think it's going to be a particularly light-hearted read, but I do think that it's going to be a very interesting one. I'm very excited to see how it compares to The Nightingale, because that was undoubtedly one of my favourite books in 2016. And then number 11 is another category that I just have not read at all since I left school, and that is poetry. And for this I've picked And Still I Rise by Maya Angelou, and poetry is just something that I have never been interested in reading, and I think that has a lot to do with studying English literature and being forced to annotate poems and read poems that didn't particularly grab my interest, and then write about them and write essays and essays about them. So I kind of have always viewed myself as the type of person who didn't enjoy reading poetry, but mostly down to Booktube, I have become more interested in the idea of picking up poetry and trying it again. So I love Maya Angelou, and I thought that this was probably a very good place to start. Don't know anything about it. It just says on the back, the poems and stories she wrote were gifts of wisdom and wit, courage and grace. Maya Angelou's poetry is lyrical, dramatic, exuberant and playful. So I'm really excited actually to give this a go and see how I get on. And then the final book that I have gone for, or the final category that I have gone for, I couldn't think of another genre that I was interested in reading, so I went for something called a random pick, and I basically went to my TBR shelf and I picked one of the books that has been on there the longest, and we're talking a good few years, maybe like 5 or 6 years, and for that I picked Sacred Hearts by Sarah Dunant. This was a book that was given it to me, and I can't remember who gave it to me, and I can't remember why they gave it to me, but it is set in 1570 in an Italian city, and it's about a young girl who has to go and live in a convent because of some kind of scandal, and she has this beautiful voice, so she joins the choir, and it's a historical narrative and follows her story. And one of the reasons that I haven't picked it up before now is that is literally all that I know about it, and when you flick through it, the writing is tiny and it seems like quite a complex read. But I am on a mission this year to kind of make a real indentation in my TBR bookshelf, so I'm committing to reading this book this year and at least being able to tick off one of the books on my ever-growing TBR pile. So there you go, they are the books that I am hoping to read in 2017. Hopefully just committing to choosing one of those books a month means that I will actually manage to get through them, but as always I will keep you updated. Do let me know what your 2017 reading resolutions are, as I would love to know. You can leave a comment down below, or you can find me on any of my social media channels, which are always on the side that I can never remember. Thank you for watching, and I will see you all soon.